kick us off. There's no way we're going to beat this. Becky has had a broad bean. The first one's grown in my garden. That is magical. Thanks for sharing, Becky.
It was quite exciting because I have just been in my garden and realised the broad beans are now ready to pick, and I've just eaten one. Although I did try and persuade my 5-year-old daughter to taste it, and she wasn't up for it. Even though she did help me plant them, and I thought that would persuade her, but she was like, "No, I remember them from last year, and I don't like them." So, but I found it delicious.
That's so nice. Oh, that's a shame. Hey, for those of you still joining us, we're just talking about the foods that we've eaten. Thank you for that, Becky. And what do you think? So growing the food is obviously part of the journey. That's really exciting. My plants tend to suffer. Have you got anything else in your garden?
Yeah, lockdown last year definitely like kick-started my veg growing. I mean, we had a house which already had veg patch, which we didn't create, so we just kind of like picked up where someone else had left off. So yeah, I've got loads of things. There's lettuce growing, there's peas already. Well, actually I picked some peas yesterday and I thought they were moncheti, and then I realized they were actually just peas that hadn't grown into peas yet, so they were a bit tough.
Baby peas.
I hadn't labeled them very well. Lettuce, mainly lettuce is the big thing that has been growing for a long time.
I love the idea that there's like a surprise vegetables going on in your garden. Yeah, that is brilliant. For those of us that are joining, I know that we're still getting some more people coming in. So for the next minute or so, please do share where you are in the world, what time it is where you are, what your name is. And if you want to talk about food, that's always one of my go-tos. So where in the world are you? What's your name? What time is it? So just so you know, we are at 5 o'clock in the UK. That's Greenwich Mean Time. And we're really excited for this panel. You'll see why. Way, oh my goodness. Gerardo, it's 10 a.m. in Mexico. What a privilege to welcome you here. Please tell me you've had breakfast already. Andrea is also in Mexico. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It really means the world to us that we're connected. That's really fabulous. We've got about 1 more minute here. We've got Isra from Egypt and it's 6 p.m. Fantastic. Incredible. Thank you so much for joining, Isra. A pleasure to welcome you. Any more? I know we've got a few people in the room. Now, just so you know, throughout this session, we will be collecting questions. So even though we are reading the chat now, during the session, you can submit questions, but we're turning the chat off. You're very welcome, Israel. We're so excited to have you with us. So the chat is going to be off, but do submit your questions. And at the end, we're going to have a good old Q&A, but you can submit your questions throughout as well. That is not a problem. So without further ado, now we've actually got 2 members from Reboot the Future, but I'm just going to introduce Holly for now. So Holly, in fact, no, let's do Reboot the Future first. I'm saying this like I'm the best person to be giving this introduction, actually, just because I know this. That's really silly, isn't it? Holly, you can speak for yourself. I do know that before Holly was at Reboot the Future, Holly was in education, so head of education at a youth charity in Brighton for 2 years, and also worked as a secondary school teacher, which is wicked. So thank you so much for hosting. I'm going to hand over to you and I'll be in the background lurking non-creepily and looking forward to finding out more about your organisation and about what you're all up to at the moment.
Great, thanks so much, Ella. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so I'm now education manager at Reboot the Future. Before that, I sort of worked for another youth charity for a couple of years, and before that worked very briefly as a school teacher in between working ski seasons and disappearing off to Italy and France for the winters, which was, perfect. So just to give you guys a little bit of a background about Reboot the Future, we're a small foundation. We were set up in 2018 by our co-founder, Chair Kim Polman, and we have a vision of a compassionate and sustainable world. So there's a principle that underpins all of our work, and it's a modern day version of the golden rule, which is to treat other people and the planet as you would wish to be treated. It's an ethos that's been around for around 3,000 years and appeared across communities and societies all around the world. But for us at Reboot, it's all about connection to ourselves, to each other, and to the world around us. And this is kind of part of the inspiration behind our campaign that we launched this year called How Will You Reboot the Future, which was aimed at inspiring new conversations on the climate crisis and supporting young people to take action. So at the heart of this campaign is an ebook written by veteran environmentalist Jonathan Porritt called Rise Up to Reboot the Future. And this was adapted into a series of short films, which many of you might have watched over on the YouTube channel before this event today. For those of you that didn't manage to catch them, the 5 short films are collectively titled Rise Up, and they're each told from the perspective of different young people who, over the next 5 years leading up to 25, each in their own way helped to bring about a more compassionate and sustainable future. So all of those films are free to watch on our YouTube channel. We're Reboot the Future. And as well, if there are any educators out there or just people that love to learn for themselves, we have a free set of teaching resources that accompany the films and Jonathan's book. And they're available on our teacher platform called Global Dimension. So again, just go to Global Dimension and search for Reboot the Future. We're joined today by Becky Burchell, who is the executive producer of the Rise Up films, and I'll be talking to her more about them in a second. And I'm now going to sort of give over to our speakers, who are all going to hopefully introduce themselves. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined not only by Becky Burchell, who's a theatre and film producer. We've also got Brighton-based climate activists Ben Skinner and Rania Ouweland. I think I said that right. Probably not. We've also got Sustainability and Social Innovation Advisor with Pearson, Paul Ellingstad. And finally, but by no means least, we've got Dr Mya-Rose Craig, also known as Birdgirl, blogger, birder, founder of Black to Nature, and the youngest Briton to ever receive an honorary doctorate. So some incredible people here. Rather than reading out your biographies, I'm going to ask each of you in turn to introduce yourselves and just tell us a bit about the work that you're doing at the moment and kind of how you got there. Ideally, if we could all aim for about a minute, that would be great. Otherwise, I might have to jump in and cut you off if I'm worried about running over time. So I'd love to start with Becky. Becky, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to produce the Rise Up films?
Yes, hi, thanks, Holly. So yes, as Holly said, I'm the executive producer for the short films, and they're the first films that I have produced. They were a product of lockdown. I think if it hadn't been lockdown, we might have done something live, which is what my background is. So my background is in festivals and the arts. I'm a theatre producer. I've launched a festival called Change Festival in 2019, which is happening again at Warwick Arts Centre in 2021. And my specialism in the arts is hopeism. So it's telling stories of hope through the arts to inspire positive change on climate change and environmental issues. So I'm really passionate about how we use storytelling to inspire people. And one of the reasons that I wanted to work on the Rise Up films or the Reboot the Future films was to really give inspiration to young people at this moment as they come out of COVID, to sort of give them hope and to see that there is a way out after all this turmoil. So yeah, so it's, for me, it's all about hope. Hopeism is my buzzword, and that's what sort of inspires me in my work.
I love that. That's brilliant. So over to you, Ben. You said in your bio that you see it as your duty to fight for our planet's survival. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you've been involved in with climate activism so far?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Holly. So the main reason why I started getting into this sort of stuff was that I found that I had a passion for young people getting involved in these important matters, because I believe that we need to involve the youth for what will be important for the future. And I guess that really links in with Reboot the Future, actually. So through kind of attending climate strikes and educating myself, I realized that other young people are also passionate about the issue. So I wanted to get them involved as well. So recently, I was lucky enough to co-chair 2 Q&As with Rania, who's here today, which was useful, I think, to facilitate conversations with young people and actually get them talking to local MPs about what they believe, and then actually have them feel as if their voice is being heard, because I think that's so key with young people. A lot of the time they don't feel like they have a voice, and I think that's something I've been trying to do, is to give them a voice to actually facilitate and create the change they want to see in their communities. And it's just been a really positive year. I've seen so much change, and I've seen more and more young people getting involved, and I think it's just really positive and leading towards the future.
That's so great to hear. It's obviously been an incredibly tough year for many people as well, but for positives to come out of it is so important. And giving young people a voice is exactly what we're here for, and what we want to see more of. Rania, Ben mentioned there that you were involved with him in sort of hosting the Climate Assembly and the MP Q&As. Tell us a bit about how you ended up getting involved in climate activism, and a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I've just finished my undergrad at Sussex University in Sociology and International Development. And I think my passion for getting involved in climate action started when I was about 16 or 15. And me and a friend applied for this grant at school to do any project abroad, basically. And we decided to go to Iceland to look at local initiatives on what was being done on the environment and preserving the planet, preserving different, and basically we did a short documentary at the end of it, and we met some incredible people like local activists, went to local farms to explore how they were dealing with the difficult weather conditions in Iceland and still managed to grow their own food. Went to some eco schools and saw how important it was to sort of talk about climate change, and not only climate change as something terrible that's happening, but also getting children to link to nature. And they had this day, one day a week, where they would go outside, go to forests and learn about their environment, really. So after that, this year I set up the first youth assembly on climate, and we basically used transport as a theme, because we were running in parallel to the main assembly that was happening in Brighton. And so we gathered basically a group of 8 to 10 people, and every week we had experts, politicians, different actors basically come in and talk about what they knew, and then we had a whole discussion afterwards, and then submitted all these proposals and discussions that we had to the council, so that they would actually take into account what we had talked about. And then I was involved with Ben on a couple of the Q&As with MPs on climate action, and me and Ben have the project hopefully to go on and set up this ambassador project in schools, where each school would elect a committee of people, and all these people would come together from different schools, basically creating a network of schools, and them come up with different projects, whether it's climate change or different topics, and have actions afterwards. So I think I've gone on for too long, so I'll stop now. But I'm very excited to be here.
It sounds great. Yeah, I love it, and I love the sort of the background that you were bringing there about Iceland. It sounds like such a cool trip. So Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about the work that you're doing at Pearson, and also why you were interested in joining us today?
Yeah, thanks so much, Holly, and I'm over the moon to be here. So, I kind of I've been working for a couple of years, maybe a couple more than others, in corporate, and people sometimes get the wrong impression of businesses, that they're really focused on profit and they only think about the environment or about society as an afterthought and maybe give something back. So for me, it's been really exciting to see like this renaissance and this resurgence of focus on corporate responsibility and leadership, that businesses of every shape and size and color, have a role to play, and have fantastic resources and assets and expertise to contribute to solving all of the problems that we have. So that's been really exciting. And what I really enjoy, working in a big organization like Pearson, that not only is focused on learning and how, learning for life helps everyone, but really focusing education and learning on solving, biggest challenges around sustainability and that as well. So it's really exciting. I'm glad to be here, because I think as well, it's not just about institutions, it's not just about businesses, it's about everyone working together, including across all generations as well.
Absolutely, that's it. And we're really keen to start getting more of these conversations going across generations, across groups of people, so that we can really make sure that everyone's voice is at the table. So that's great. And then finally, Mya-Rose, thank you so much for taking the time this evening. I know your schedule is super jam-packed. You've got the summer camps coming up as well that we'd love to hear more about. But first of all, we'd just love to hear more about you and how and why you became involved in activism.
Yeah, totally. So I guess in terms of the first bit of activism I ever did, like I'm 19 now, and it was probably when I was 11 or 12, and I remember there was this massive oil spill in the Sundarbans, this massive mangrove forest in Bangladesh where my family's from, and just no one was talking about it at all in the West. And eventually I decided that I would talk about it because I had a blog, a few people read it. I thought, I'll have to do it myself. And I ended up doing a lot of, I suppose, fundraising essentially to do with that. And I managed to send loads of money out in terms of the oil spill. And I was really young at the time, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I think that's the first time that I realized as a kid that you can make a difference, and that when you're worried about things, you can try and make them better, which is so simple, but I think it's so important. So one of the issues I spend quite a lot of time talking about and campaigning about is that there's a big issue in the UK in terms of racism and diversity in environmental spaces, whether that's literally in the countryside, in the outdoors, or in environmental spaces like the climate change movement. So I've been doing lots of campaigning about that for years now. And a lot of that literally just came from the fact that I was not white in a space that is incredibly white. But also it's blossomed into something bigger, and I think that's incredibly important. I'm very aware this is more than a minute now, but just quickly, in terms of climate activism as well, I've been really involved in that for a really long time, but like everyone, I've gotten more involved in the last few years. I think it's so exciting because it's really easy to forget just how impactful young people have been on the climate change conversation and how mainstream it has gotten since young people have gotten involved and Fridays for Future has started. And I think when you don't have the power to vote, it's so easy to feel like you don't have a voice. And I think things like that are proof that you do. And yeah, I was at a climate change protest. I was camping for 3 days this weekend, literally at G7 with lots of our world leaders, showing that we have not forgotten about these issues and that we're still going to turn up and bang on our drums and remind them that this is our #1 priority. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you care about things, the best thing to do is always to go out there and tell people and just try and make a difference. But yeah, thank you for having me.
That's so great. You're so articulate and inspirational. I'm just sat here going, yeah, absolutely. But it's such good points. While I'm chatting to you, I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about your new book, We Have a Dream, and about potentially maybe about some of the other young Indigenous and people of colour you spoke to who are working to protect our planet.
Yeah, 100%. So like I said, I'm quite involved in the climate change movement, and in particular, I think that global climate justice is so important in terms of, I suppose, pushing for equity within the climate change movement. And something I became aware of super quickly was the fact that we have a very small handful of people who over and over again are given that media platform to talk about things, and the majority of them are white and the majority of them are from the West. And I knew that there must be loads of other people, young people out there doing things, and I decided that I was going to track them down and give them that platform to talk about the issues that they cared about. So last year I wrote my book, We Had a Dream, and it's about 30 different young activists of colour, young Indigenous activists from literally all over the world, all 6 continents that people live in. And that's actually just become available for pre-order. I got the first physical one a few days ago. It's very exciting. But I think with COP26 coming up in particular, these kind of projects are so important because it's so easy for especially the climate change conversation to be dominated by Western countries. So I think making sure that people from the global South, countries in the global South, are able to have their say, especially because they're the ones experiencing climate change right now. I think that's going to be so important in terms of solving these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So am I right in thinking it comes out in August? Is that right? But
yes, it's
awesome.
available for pre-order and it comes out 3rd of August. I'm very excited.
No, me too. And you should be, and absolutely, you're totally right in that we need to be sort of bringing more voices in. I'm going to open up the conversation now sort of to the wider group, and if any time you have any questions of your own that you'd like to direct to each other, like please feel free. But I'm just going to kick us off with a question aimed at Becky, but related to the fact that Mya-Rose has obviously just written a book. We've obviously just watched these short films. Becky, the climate crisis is often perceived as an issue for like the science-based or the business sectors. What role do the arts have in addressing the climate crisis, and how can the industry be better supported to make a difference?
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, so I mean, my journey into sort of environmentalism was when my daughter was born, and I guess I was thinking about her future and thinking about, you know, what the world was going to be like when she grew up. And even though I was quite environmentally aware before that moment, that was the kind of tipping point where I sort of thought, actually, my previous life, where I was, you know, a successful festival producer, could no longer continue, because I wanted to sort of focus my skills and attention on arts that made difference, that were, you know, that were helping the environmental conversation move forward. And I guess, like, over that time, which has been about 5 or 6 years now, what I've realized is that you know, first of all, to solve climate change and environmental issues, we have to change so many things that it almost becomes, you know, almost becomes ridiculous to talk about environmentalism as a sort of silo. I think Margaret Atwood was the one that said, you know, it's not climate change, it's everything change. So first of all, I sort of start from that point. But, you know, that can feel really overwhelming and really scary. But over time, what I've realized is, first of all, the positive stories are really, really important, that we have to have hope. We have to see that other people are doing things differently. We have to be able to imagine further into the future than we do. We have to practice long-term thinking. We have to sort of practice our imaginative skills to think about what that different future would look like, to feel it, to smell it, to understand it. And that's where the arts can come in to kind of tell those stories and help people imagine that. But the other thing that recently has sort of occurred to me more and more is that we need to zoom out even further and actually really question what core stories are at the heart of our cultures that are stopping us making these changes. And some of those are so embedded in our being that they're really hard to unpick. And so I'm really interested now about how the arts can help shift those myths and those stories. So, for example, the idea that humans are separate from nature. And even though, you know, now people say, oh, we know we're part of nature, it's like we can say that, but do we really feel that? Do we really, really feel that in our heart? People do. So I'm interested in how the arts can kind of challenge that and help us feel more connected. And that's why there's such an amazing crossover with the kind of work that Mya-Rose is doing in terms of, you know, nature connection, and the arts is such a crossover there. Another myth that we sort of hold is, you know, the sort of infinite growth on the finite planet. Again, like, you know, so many people say, oh, we know that we can't keep doing that, but yet we're still in this growth paradigm where we still are continuing to live in those ways. So I'm really interested now in how the arts can help, you know, tell different stories and showcase and demonstrate sort of myths, that to challenge those myths and try and tell new stories. And I think when you look around the world, I think Indigenous cultures have held different stories much longer than we have, and perhaps in the West we've gone on a different tangent. And so there's a huge amount to learn from other cultures around the world. So again, in terms of the arts, I'm really interested in what stories we can find globally. It's not like we have to make them up. They're not new stories. They're old stories that we have lost, that we need to rediscover.
So true. So I've got a question now for Mya-Rose, Rania and Ben. As the Rise Up films show, there are many different ways that young people can address the climate crisis, from changing individual actions to influencing wider systemic change. What advice would the three of you give to other young people who feel passionate about the climate but just don't know how to get involved in activism or what they can do about climate change?
I don't mind going. Or Rania, you go.
No, you go, I'll follow you.
Okay. I mean, I think when it comes to climate change, the biggest issue for young people is just feeling really powerless and like you don't have anything to do, or you don't have a way to make an impact. And I think the best way to really empower yourself in terms of taking your first step into those areas is to not try going solo. Like, I think there's so many young climate groups all around the world now. Like, I think there's probably a Fridays for the Future in like every city in the world, it feels like. So I think going out and finding a group of people who care about the same issues that you do, who are willing to go out and protest about the same issues, is like a really good first step in terms of just, I suppose, learning how to protest, how to be an activist.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would definitely agree with that. I think a lot of it is about confidence, because I think from a very early age, we're sort of like treated as children, because obviously we go through that phase of being children. But when you're like 11, 12, 13, until that age, you start, and even earlier, honestly, I think you have a very strong grasp of what's going on around you, whether it's by hearing conversations that your parents are having, or you're starting to read the news, or by watching films. And I think that links back to what Becky was saying about recreating narratives, is because as children we watch films. I think that's probably the most, or at least one of the most powerful ways I see to reach young people, is because that's such a kind of easy way to connect to images, rather than reading a book, which some people find very easy and dive into like different stories. So I'd say like really having confidence in our capacity to think creatively about things and gather together as a collective. And I also think like, one, there's a lot of existing groups, but also like if you have an idea and you don't think it exists yet about, I don't know, like for example, setting up a youth assembly, I just had this idea in my head and I didn't really know how to start it. And then I just started Googling different groups in Brighton, community groups, and got in touch with them. And then there's always someone out there that will get in touch with you and help you out with projects. And then, yeah, it's about just putting a group together, really, I think is the most essential thing. As Mya-Rose was also saying, not working on your own, I guess.
Yeah, I think, yeah, two really great points there. But, and I agree with all of them. I just say, really being ruthless with your campaigning. I find always as a young person, whenever I try and speak out, and often at kind of council events and things like that, I'm always sort of not spoken down to, but almost kind of, questioned about it, maybe just because of my age. And I think in your kind of campaigning career, shall we say, you're always going to find blocks and kind of road bumps. And I don't think that should be kind of something that should adhere you from it. I think it'd be something that should make you more passionate about it, and that you should keep fighting for it. Because if you are passionate about this issue, which I hope many of you are, it shouldn't be something that you just stop at this first kind of sign of difficulty, because it's a difficult journey. Like, it's not going to be easy, but I think it's something that we all have to keep fighting about. And things you can do to help is speak to others, educate them, because a lot of the people like yourselves, you could have your perspective changed by someone else. And just kind of opening up these conversations, I think, is so key. So even if that's just with your family, if that's with friends, just expanding the conversation, making it more kind of a normal daily topic, I think is really important to actually bring it more into our society of, hey, let's actually do something to, create some change and do something better for the environment. And just specifically for young people, something that really helped me was joining my youth council. And I'm not sure if there is any setup where you are, but if there are any young people listening, I'd really kind of encourage you to actively look out and see if you can join it, because that's really kind of facilitated most of the things I've done.
That's great advice. Thank you, guys. So I have a question for Paul. In your experience working for large tech companies over your career, how have you seen businesses' attitudes to the climate crisis changing? And how do you feel about the future of technology's impact on society and the planet?
Wow, that's a lot. I'll try to keep it contained. But, first off, you know, I've literally seen the whole progression of the technology sector from, you know, back when Bill Gates had this big dream of, you know, a computer on every desk in every home. And now it's like, you know, pervasiveness of technology in everything that we do, like you can't get away from it. And that's a double-edged sword. It can be a really bad thing. And we know all about, from, you know, mental health and well-being to disinformation and everything else. But the flip side is that the connectivity and reaching out to people who have the same interests and to mobilize movements, wow, it's just, you know, the ripple effect is just unbelievable. So technology is definitely, you know, a fantastic enabler, but it can be, you know, a crushing tsunami as well if it's not managed properly. So, you know, just be smart about how we use it. You know, the tech sector, you know, went from kind of, you know, the darling and look at all this great stuff that they're doing and, you know, do no evil and all that, to now I think people are kind of going, wait a minute, you know, even the data centers, you know, what impact is that having on the climate? So I think companies themselves, not just tech companies, everyone's waking up to the responsibility of what impact am I having, for better or for worse. But at the same time, it's not, you know, well enough that we just do that as organizations or as individuals on our own. You know, the checks and balances and kind of the watchdogs and the regulation that kind of keep people in check too, because, you know, end of the day, organizations, you know, will sometimes exploit the situation, but thankfully there's a lot of fantastic organizations that are now making purpose very transparent, you know, very accessible of what they do. I've got to give a shout out, you know, for the B Corps, you know, that I think are really agitating for change. There was a session earlier in the week saying, you know, one of the B Corps, you know, the CEO of Innocent Drink said, you know, it'd be great if we didn't have to have the B Corp if that's just what everyone did, but we don't yet. So I'm glad that the B Corp is here. And that's, you know, we got to keep pushing until this becomes pervasive and ubiquitous. Got to keep going.
Yeah, that's so true. And so it kind of brings up a question I'd like to address to all of you on the call is, what small actions would you like to see more business leaders taking and more sort of leaders in general taking to kind of shift us, I guess, towards a better future?
I think there's a few things, like, so because the Youth Assembly was on transport, we kind of discussed how businesses could change or influence the usage of transport in the city. One way I could see it was more electric, maybe the business funding more electric bikes for their employees, because it costs a lot of money for individual people to buy those. So I don't know, like, sort of encouraging people to take alternative forms of transport, but that usually comes with either money incentive, which maybe businesses would have more of a profit margin to invest in, depending obviously on the size of the business. I think also maybe really reflecting on, as you were saying, Paul, on the impact that a business is having on the environment. And again, that is very like dependent on the size of the business. If it's like big corporations like Barclays, like obviously thinking about where they're investing their money. And I think it's much harder to, and obviously there's a lot of campaigns going on divesting from big banks, but I think it's definitely harder maybe to, as individuals, to impact those the decisions of these big businesses, although boycotts do like work. So I think, yeah, like just in general thinking about a responsibility towards the environment and how being in charge of different, like a whole set of people, basically all these employees working for the business, how you can I don't know, like encourage them to take different forms of transport, for example. Yeah, and maybe also I was thinking there's this, I can't remember what it's called, but thinking in terms of sort of ecological responsibility, that maybe like there would be points awarded to different businesses according to how well they're doing in terms of preserving the environment or their carbon impact, carbon footprint. So yeah, maybe signing, I really can't remember on the top of my head, but yeah, signing up to these different maybe things where you're encouraged to reduce your carbon footprint.
I'll just add quickly, you know, Mya-Rose had said, speaking up about the things you do, part of the reason that we're in the crisis that we are is that a lot of people look around and say, well, I'm not going to be able to change it. I'm just one person, or not my job, someone else will do it. So even just expressing that you care and recognizing that that influences others and you connect with others, and that's how you build movements and that's how you drive change.
Absolutely. So I have another question for all of you now. And Becky, we've heard yours already, but I was just wondering what the turning points were for you in terms of becoming involved in sustainability and realizing that you did actually have the power to make the change. Were there any key moments in your lives that you thought, that's it, that I actually can do this and I should be as well?
I'd say for me, the turning point for kind of getting involved in youth activism was actually attending the youth climate strike in Brighton. So this was on a school day. So people actually got out of school to actually go and do this. And I thought, well, wow, that's actually pretty impressive. Like there's thousands of people turning up, showing their kind of passion for this. And, you know, as we kept going along, kind of campaigning and through the city, it was just so encouraging to see so many people were also passionate about it. And I guess that links into Rania talking about confidence. This sort of gave me the confidence to be like, well, others are also getting involved, then why shouldn't I as well? And I thought I could step up and get involved in more things. So I attended more climate strikes. I even attended the Youth Climate Assembly, which Rania set up. And I think just having that time where you recognize other people are also passionate about it and you're not kind of by yourself thinking about it was really important for me.
Yeah, it's good to know. And it's like a couple of you have mentioned now, it's that kind of feeling of not being alone, that actually you are part of something bigger and that you have that support. So Mya-Rose, I kind of wanted to talk to you about this a little bit, because obviously you founded Black to Nature, which is a charity fighting for equal access to nature for visible minority ethnic people. And I just wondered what advice you would give to young people who don't see climate activism as relevant or accessible to them.
I guess I'd say that I think there's a very narrow view of what activism, especially climate activism, is. And I know in lots of Western countries, at least, there's a lot of issues in terms of people not wanting to get involved because they see it as a very middle class white pastime basically. I know there are lots of people who feel like you know they're working, they're too busy living, putting food on the table to get involved with like campaigning for something that's happening in 5-10 years time when they're thinking about the next week. So I guess I'd say in general, I think there's so many ways to be a climate activist or to show that you care about climate change without having to, you know, be going to loads of groups all the time and going protesting all the time and things like that, even though I think that is extremely important. I think on one level, even very low level things like signing petitions and things are really important, just because things like that just show your government, show your leaders that these are issues that you care about, and these are possibly issues that could swing the vote in, you know, a few months or a few years, which at the end of the day is all that a lot of leaders care about. I think not to lean too heavily on the lifestyle stuff, but I think there's various really small lifestyle changes that can make a really big difference. Even just things like trying not to buy fast fashion, or not doing like massive clothes hauls and things like that, or trying to eat meat a few less days a week, all of that is helping with climate change. So there's so many little things you can do in your day-to-day life that you don't need particularly extra time, you don't really need any extra money, but you're still helping and you're still making a difference. And I think that's the most important thing, especially when you're trying to stay empowered within a movement, because it's so easy to sort of fall behind, especially when there's always people off at the distance where you feel like they're the perfect activists who are spending all their spare time dedicating it to campaigning and activism, and they've never done anything bad to the environment in their life, which is not true. So I think just doing your best in terms of your life and the lifestyle that you live is really, really important in terms of getting involved, but also, someone mentioned earlier, not burning out, like looking after yourself as well.
And do any of you have any top tips for avoiding burnout? Because, yeah, as you mentioned, and as it was mentioned in the chat, it can get so overwhelming thinking about the climate crisis and feeling like that weight is on your shoulders. So do you have anything that you do that helps you to manage that feeling?
Personally, like, I have struggled with burnout a lot, and I know lots of other people that have made themselves honestly pretty unwell via like campaigning about the climate. And I think the biggest thing is to just be aware of burnout and be aware that you're allowed to take a break. Like, I think the thing that people forget a little bit is that it's not actually like young people, especially like people, under 18s, it's not actually your job to campaign about the climate. It's not your responsibility, and it's not an issue if you stop for a while, if you take a break. And I think that, so many people are so aware of how urgent it is that they're not willing to just rest. And so I think the biggest thing is actually just like taking stock of where you're at and just looking after yourself, which sounds so obvious, but people just don't do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's so important to say no to things sometimes. Like, it's very easy to get caught up in all these amazing projects, and that's the thing, is like you do one project and then so many things come out of it, and it's such a rewarding experience to be part of and learn so much from it, and then you just get sort of taken into it, and it's so hard to take a step back from it once, because you expect everyone, like, you have so many other people have so many expectations from you. And I think it's important to be able to say, okay, like, I do need a break to either focus on different things or just relax, or because that's the thing, it's like we all have other responsibilities on the side of campaigning and activism, whether it's like education or work or family, and it's important that it doesn't completely take over your life in a way that because at a point it won't feel like you want to do it anymore. So yeah, being able to say stop, I think, is an important thing, or at least for a bit.
Yeah, someone asked this question in the chat actually earlier on, and it comes up a lot, and I was just saying, actually, we this is another time when we need to look at nature and see what we can learn from that. And if you look at any cycle in nature, there's like an ebb and a flow. If you look at a wave, there's a forward energy and a backward energy. If you look at the cycles of the year, there's the summer and everything coming into growth and into bloom, and then everything recedes again. And I think if we can think about that in terms of our own energy and ideas, there's lots of wisdom from our past and from other cultures that teach us this, that we can't keep pushing. It's another narrative that we've been told in the West about productivity and about you have to just keep going, keep producing. And actually it's not, we are nature, and it is not natural to do that. So sort of feeling into, sometimes you are going to be full of energy, and sometimes that's great, and you ride that wave, and then you need to come back and recede and rest and percolate and process all of that. And we can't be creative when we're active. We need to rest to be creative. We often need quiet and still. All the best ideas come in the shower. They're not there when you're typing your email. So yeah, thinking about the monthly cycles of the moon, thinking about the yearly cycles, thinking about the daily cycle of our own rhythm. So yes, nature is a great teacher for helping us with this, I think.
Touche.
Yeah, totally. I know we said we were going to kind of try and keep this to around 45 minutes, but there are just a few things that I kind of wanted to bring, sort of kind of wrap up with. And I know we might have a couple of questions. So if anyone needs to disappear, do, but if you can stay on, we have the space till 6 p.m. And I was just thinking, you know, talking of kind of nature and these natural sort of cycles and what kind of beginnings and endings. I know Ben, I know Rania, Mya-Rose, I'm not sure where you're at with your education now, but I know that it's sort of years at Ben, you're finishing school, Rania, you're finishing university. What are your plans for or what do you hope to see over the next 5 years? Maybe not necessarily personal plans, but what would you like to see happening and changing over the next 5 years? And where do you see yourself and your journeys going?
So yeah, I just finished school, so I'm 18, and it's strange because there's so many things I can do. So there's a lot going through my mind, and I'd have to say, Mya-Rose, it's quite inspirational what you've done. Like, I don't know, it's just quite, you know, encouraging to see that there are people that can go on to make like significant impact. And I'm happy with what I've done so far, but like in the short-term future, so Ryan and I are setting up this local project, Young Youth Ambassadors. I'm really, you know, looking forward to, you know, starting to get that going a bit more, and, you know, starting to see some more kind of direct impact in my local community. Also, with Youth Council, I'm involved in a campaign which is talking to sustainable businesses and then taking the information we get from them to other local businesses, which could be maybe doing a bit more. So hoping to expand from that onto kind of bigger businesses, because I think a key part of like this issue is that people feel like bigger companies and bigger businesses should be making a more kind of change. So that's an avenue we're trying to look at. But I know I say in the next 5 years, hopefully I'm still doing this, I'm still making an impact and kind of, you know, avoiding burnout and just sort of keeping on with everything else.
I can go. Yeah, so I am not sure what I want to do really. I'm going to uni in the autumn. I finished school last summer. I'm kind of between things. And I guess really in the like really long term, 5 or 10 years, I guess I hope that there won't really be a need for like climate activism at least anymore. And that we'll sort of laugh about like, you know, 5 or 10 years ago where we had to spend all our spare time campaigning about these things. But yeah, I'm going off to study politics, and I guess I think you know, it may be less exciting, but sorry to clarify, I don't want to be a politician, but I do think working like within the systems of things are also really important. So I think something going forward I want to push for more as like a more like double-pronged approach, where you've got this amazing wave of youth activists externally really putting that pressure on, but also internally there's lots of, you know, as a bureaucratic stuff going on to do with like, you know, really pushing for laws and bills and things like that. Because I think, you know, like G7, which happened this last weekend, I think that really shows just how important the actual politics of all of this is. But yeah, I don't really know what I want to do, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, I've just finished university, and I think it's at the stage where, and I think this was actually so good, this little conversation, because it makes me remember that it's actually such an important, like, I think it's sometimes easy to forget. You get caught in everything about life, like trying to find a job, trying to earn money, and I think it's so easy to just lose track of what you're actually really passionate about, and that you actually really care about changing things and inspiring other people and getting inspired by other people. And so I think, yeah, it's quite, I mean, my plan is, I'm very passionate about music, so I think also sort of telling stories through music, and sort of, I don't know, maybe towards music therapy, and how using that can help people in terms also of the environment, can create more headspace for people to get involved in climate activism or different forms of activism that they're passionate about, because I think that's a really important thing. Is if you're not in a good sort of headspace and have poor mental health, then it's very difficult to keep going in these fights. So I think something around that, so something creative and how creativity can contribute to different campaigns that I'm passionate about and that other people are passionate about. So, yeah.
Holly, if I can just add quickly, as the old guy,
Yeah.
the great thing in change usually has like a negative stigma, but one of the great things about change right now is that, number one, you might start one career and wind up doing 5 other careers in a lifetime now. So you're not kind of stuck in a silo, even by the choices that you make now, whether they're good choices or bad choices. Secondly, what's really exciting to see too, is that people that were in jobs that were hurting society or hurting the planet, you know, are retraining, are starting new careers and are doing new things. So like, I really just deeply love and embrace lifelong learning, because everyone can have an impact and you can keep learning and keep growing and keep contributing in new ways all throughout your life.
It's so true. And yeah, I echo that absolutely. As soon as I asked the question, I thought, how mean is that? Because when I was I'm only 30, and in the last 10 years, I have already done so many different things. And like I said, I was a teacher, and then I went skiing, and then I worked for charities. And now I was in looking at sort of bullying charities. Now it's sustainability. There are so many options, and it's not just our careers, but also the other things that we do in our lives as well. So it's so exciting to hear all of your plans. And I love the kind of direction that everyone's going. And we are, I think, as we've sort of mentioned, as a society, we are moving forward, things are changing, things are getting better, and we have to have that hope. And I think that hope is well founded. You know, I am a huge optimist, but I honestly believe that things are getting better, and a lot of that is thanks to young people like you guys who are making your voices heard and are getting out there and are getting on with things in the way that we need to happen. So thank you all, and thank you to all of you guys for joining us today. I'm going to invite Ella back, if she's still around, to kind of wrap us up and bring in any questions. Hey Ella, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I'm going to try. There we go. Fuzzy hair, but we're back. God, you don't need me. That was storming. We covered so much ground. I love that we dipped into mental health as well, because you cannot work in trying to create change, which funnily enough is one of the only constants in the world, is change itself, and not have it impact your health. But listening to especially the younger people talking about their options, and I love how wise you are. You sound really much more grounded than I could be at your age, let alone now. And I'm like you, Holly, I'm 30, and it's like, oh, these ones are pretty wise. But it sounds like, and something that I think we're hearing a lot of in our culture, it's just so much pressure on the individual. And I think it was Mya-Rose, you were talking about how, you know, not to lean too much on one person's actions. But there is power in that. So it's this careful balance of taking responsibility, not too much responsibility, working with others, remembering to rest. It's such a journey. And thank God for that, because wouldn't it be pants if we had all the answers and this was it now? Like, we got each other, and that is so brilliant. Now we have got a question from Andrea, who says, now I've got something I think about this, but I think you lot will have much more to say. So Andrea says, sometimes I think about entrepreneurship, but then I think about the environmental implication it has. Any advice? I think when I hear that question, we're talking about being right at the start of launching some kind of enterprise. What are some things we need to be mindful of? Who wants to take this? Paul, I'm going to go for you, if that's all right. I think it's a natural lead there.
Something they're saying. So entrepreneurship, think about social entrepreneurship, social innovation. What's really exciting is that entrepreneurship is about innovation. It's about ideas, and whether you're doing it purely for profit, which I don't think anyone really is doing it anymore, or very few people, you know, it's focusing on a problem and a need and coming up with fantastic solutions. And now it just happens that those need to be very sustainable solutions and deliver impact, positive impact for society and for planet as well. So the actual tenets of entrepreneurship, absolutely apply for everything that we're trying to do to help the planet and help society. So I'd say go for it. Go for entrepreneurship. Make it social entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it can definitely, business can definitely be the vehicle, can't it? It's not an easy one though. Anyone else got any thoughts on that? No, Benjamin's shaking his head.
Yeah.
Becky, maybe?
Yeah, so I set up a social enterprise when I launched Change Festival, and I'm about to set up another social enterprise, and doing a lot of research on entrepreneurship and you know, how you start things. There's an amazing organization in Hackney which is a growing farming enterprise called Growing Communities, and they've done a piece of research on this farm which shows that it's like a farmers market and a veg box scheme, and they provide amazing organic veg to the community. And they've shown that for every £1 spent, there's £3.61 worth of social impact for that enterprise, which is way better than any charity. So charities normally have like £2 of social impact. And for me, that's just such an amazing story that they set up. You know, they're not a profit-making business, but they do make money. And it's for the community are involved. It's about healthy food. It's about, you know, educating people on environmentalism and seasonality. It's about paying workers fairly. Like, it's a complete holistic approach which deals with so many social problems, so many environmental problems, and provides people with really healthy food. So it's like, what is not to love about that? You know, that is essentially an entrepreneurship. It's a business. What's not to love about that? We need more of that. So I say go for it.
Becky, I hope you sell your broad beans. I would buy all your vegetables. We also had this wonderful talk earlier, by the way, from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation around circular fashion. And we're talking about how actually we need to be thinking about making things recyclable and sustainable right from the get-go, and then creating logistics for those items to be returned, to be repurposed, reused, like 100%. And that's, Becky, when you're talking about this farm in Hackney, like, it just, you can hear the relationships, you can hear the friendships, the community. And I think it's amazing what technology has done. And thank God, you know, we're here via technology. We're connected in a way we could never have been, but it has divided us in some ways. And business is going to be one of those things that reconnects us properly. I know that we've talked a little bit about burnout, so thank you for that. Oh, by the way, also Rethinking Organizations is a fantastic book. If you're looking at challenging hierarchical structures that feel a little bit, then that's a good starting point as well. Do we have any questions? What I'd like to know is, panelists, do you have any questions for each other? Is there something that you've gone, oh, that sounds interesting? Or did you find it frightfully dull when hearing each other speak? I don't know. We're using a method called popcorn, by the way. That's where one of you just goes, pop.
Too much pressure. I feel like I've asked all my questions. I've got them in there so I can sit back. But
that is fair enough. No, I'll count to 3, and if no one goes, we'll do something else.
Yeah, I'll take that as the positive that we got all the questions answered. Anyone?
Yeah, fill to the brim of inspiration. I'll tell you what, actually, what I just as sort of my closing statement on this, before I say just a huge thank you so much for giving us your time today and really reflecting on your own journeys and sharing your visions and sharing your struggles as well, and your thoughts and experiences. It's been a real journey, and thank you so much for your time today. You know, again, we're kind of coming back to this idea all day we have around connection, around community. And actually, Benjamin, you were talking, and in fact all of you have spoken about the importance of working with others. Seek out other organizations. We all feel like we're on our own. And actually, for me personally, I am such a sucker for thinking that my worth and my productivity are the same thing, and they're not. And hearing you speak genuinely makes my shoulders go, because you're all right. You're younger than us, most of you, and you're smashing it. And, you know, Becky in lockdown, producing a film like that, and, you know, Paul leading right to make circular economies with big businesses, like, we can breathe, and that's going to lead to more creativity. So a huge thank you. Right, folks, so we're going to wrap up for the day. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists. Is there any closing notes, Holly, before we leave?
just to thank you so much. I know Rania's got to run off. I'm sure we've overrun by quite a little bit, but yeah, just a massive thank you from us.
Yes. Thank you, Rania, and thank you all of you. All right, folks, so I just want to say, like, I'm just going to run through what we actually went through today, because it has been a heck of a journey. So we started off with a word from our founders, John and Kate, Katie, who we wouldn't be here without. Then Cherry from South Korea told us about being a global social leader and was talking to us about what she's learnt from setting up Greener is Cleaner and working with others to continue that mission and vision. Then we had Katie, Ed and Emmy talking about how to grow as a leader. How special is it that we get Oxford University, one of the oldest universities in the entire world, speaking to us? I just, wow. And they're talking about love. Ha! How's that for modern? Then we had a brilliant chat by Alex Betts on refugees, really breaking down what actually causes migration and how can we, as everyday people, change the vision for what being a refugee is. It's being a human being, and they are valuable people, and we just need to give them a chance to lead. Then we had our global goals competition announced by Hamzy, who is the new father of 3 triplets, which is awesome. I don't know how many other triplets you'd have. 3 is the right one. And we heard from our winners, even though we're all winners when we're working towards global goals. We heard about circular fashion through the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We had creative bravery with Helena Good, and you've got opportunities to get involved there with the Glasgow project. And just now we have had Reboot the Future, hosted by our lovely Holly and our guests. So that's us done. Thank you so much for joining us. I cannot, we've been crying in the backgrounds, by the way, in a good way. We're just so touched and inspired to be with you. It's an honor to be here. I won't be with you tomorrow, sadly, because I'm doing social action, so it's not a bad problem to have. But I will be rewatching all of the videos on YouTube and finding out more on the GSL Festival homepage. And don't forget, you can get your recycled t-shirt from T Mill, and there's more info on that as you can find it. Am I missing anything, Zoom buddies? I'm going to get a note here saying, you forgot to say. No, oh, we're just getting people saying, this is amazing. But yes, please do come visit us tomorrow. We can't wait to, the team can't wait to welcome you. All righty, that's us done. So wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is and whatever you have just eaten, we wish you all the best and another day tomorrow. Bye, everyone. Bye, bye, bye.